Hello, everybody. Welcome to Webinar Wednesday. My name is Martin Loffers. I am the Chief Transfer Officer of Supply Chain Media. You may also know me as the Editor-in-Chief of Supply Chain Movement, its quarterly magazines, its bi-weekly newsletter. And I'm also the architect of the IT Subway Map. We'll discuss it later. Together with Glenn Campbell from Oracle, we have an exciting, interesting, and interactive webinar in the next hour. We're going to discuss the use and the value of a supply chain command center. So, that's what we're going to do. So, as you see here, I'm on the left. I'm Martin Lovers. You probably seen my picture before, maybe too often. Anyway, so next to me, I have Glenn Campbell. Welcome, Glenn.
Hi, thank you, Martin.
So, well, to introduce you, you have been around in this business quite a while. So, can you give me a bit of a background about yourself, and also, where you started out with, so people have a better understanding where you come from, what you know.
Yeah, sure. So I've been in supply chain planning for the past 25 years. So my entire career. I started out in the consumer goods industry in South Africa, where I had various roles in supply chain planning, demand planning, supply planning, to actually creating a sales and operation planning process for the company. I spent 9 years or 11 years at the company, and then joined Oracle in 2007. Spent a couple of years at Oracle in solution engineering for supply chain planning. And then the next 9 years implementing supply chain planning, Oracle supply chain planning solutions around the world. And now for the past 2 years, looking after the strategy for supply chain planning in EMEA. So yeah, seen all sides, seen it from a customer perspective, seen it in a sales cycle perspective, implemented it, seen all the joys and pains from an implementation perspective, a lot of the joys from customers actually getting to see how it works and seeing the benefits. Okay. And now supporting all ends from implementations to go lives to sales support all over the place.
All right. So we're going to talk about the command center, and that's new stuff, exciting stuff.
Yes.
So some practicalities. So this webinar will be recorded. The PDF will be made available within 48 hours. The whole audience is on mute, but you can interact with us. So there are two ways. There's a chat function on the right-hand side, so everybody can watch the chat function and can respond to that. So, but if you have questions to Glenn or myself, please use the Q&A functionality on the right-hand side. You see these small text bubbles. And I will track down these questions. If these questions are in line of the conversation I will be having with Glenn, I will ask these questions immediately. If not, we have a Q&A at the end, and we'll ask this question at that time. And next, we also have an extra 30 minutes. So after 5 o'clock CET, Glenn and myself will be joining at table 1 in the virtual lounge. So basically, you can join us in a conversation about command center control towers. So there's a lot of opportunities to connect with us. But feel free to ask questions along the way during this next 60 minutes, and especially use the Q&A function on the right-hand side. All right. To start with, I'm like I said, the architect of the IT Subway Map. This is the 22-23 version of this year. Well, you have all these subway lines, we'll call us. Black is ERP, red is warehouse management, and so forth, so on. And yes, of course, Oracle is also in it. And based on this represents where Oracle has substantial implementations working live in Europe. And you see, of course, it started out with ERP, but also warehouse management, transport management, S&OP, demand planning, etc. Anything to add from your side, commenting on this, Glenn?
No, just that we cover end-to-end supply chains. So that's one of the keys, is that a lot of our competitors will focus just on some elements of the supply chain, whereas we cover ERP, HCM, CX, supply chain.
Yeah. All right. And this is from legal perspective a slide. Anything to comment on your side with this?
No, I think everyone who's dealt with Oracle has seen this. We just have to put it up there, as I may discuss some roadmap issues.
So basically now we get to the supply chain topics we all know, but we have to address. So we have seen a lot of disruptions, and my expectation, these disruptions won't go away for the next years or decades. So, what is your take on the disruptions in supply chain?
Yes, so one thing that we can depend on is disruptions, as you mentioned, Martin. The rate at which we're getting disruptions is increasing. So that's one of the things that we need to bear in mind. But there's also other things like inflationary pressures, requirements around sustainability, new ways of working. So things that never used to be around are here, and it's not changing. So that's one of the huge challenges on supply chains. And also the one topic is that if I had to look back 3-4 years and I tell people that I work in supply chain, they'll say, what? Now everyone knows what supply chains are because of all the challenges that we've been facing.
Yeah.
And the challenges are increasing. And also the dependencies that people had in the past on events happening in a certain order or in a certain pattern, seasonal profiles and things, that's also changed. So it's turned things on its head, and people have to change the way that they operate to cope, really.
Yeah, and the second point about raw materials and component shortages, it seems to be fading away because we all been through it during COVID. But
Yeah.
in the next decade, we all want bio-based material and raw materials, so there will be a shortage in that matter. So that's something also be staying on our agenda, I think.
Yes, it goes back to that last point, the proliferation of new business models, and not only business models, but the way things are changing. So,
Yeah,
for example, electric cars. I mean, going back a couple of years, everything was based on diesel and
yeah.
petrol, and now the entire model has shifted. So people often have to adjust completely the way that they do things.
Yeah, and also the markets are changing because the German automotive was very strong, but now they are overwhelmed by Chinese competitors with electric cars, and
Exactly,
that's changing the market also for the tier one suppliers. So
exactly.
maybe you can tell us how to navigate this kind of uncertainty.
Well, I what I wanted to also point out is not only are we getting disruptions, but there's also a change in technology that's causing disruptions. So
Hmm.
when we talk about new things like AI and machine learning, that's a really hot topic, and now everyone is now wanting that. But then there's also things like, with all the disruptions, there's a requirement now where people are now wanting end-to-end visibility. So in the past they could get away with, say, planning on Excel or having disparate isolated systems, but now because of all the disruptions, there's now a need to have this end-to-end visibility, but also the technology is now changing, so that if you don't have these in place, then you now can't compete anymore with your competitors because they may have all of these technologies in place.
Hmm.
There's also complete changes in the way supply chains operated. So if we go back to COVID times, the first supply chains that fell over were the ones that were the most sort of cost effective, just in time types of supply chains. Those are the ones that fell over the fastest. So there's now a need to adjust not only the way we operate, to include things like near sourcing, onshoring, being more agile in terms of how your supply chains operate. Because if we look back to COVID, if we had more agile supply chains back then we wouldn't have run into the problems we ran into.
Yeah, and on the third point, about data sources, a lot of companies are talking about, the need to increase forecasting accuracy, but at some level there is no any sense of it to get a higher level. So, companies come more and more to a realization there's an end to forecast accuracy.
Yeah, yes and no. In some cases, well, I mentioned in the past, or mentioned in the previous slide, those shifts in demand patterns means it's more difficult to forecast.
Yep.
But changes in technology, like using machine learning in your forecasting accuracy tools to actually support that, that is where we can actually see advantages over just using sort of typical best fit type models. So there are advantages. There's also a lot of technology going on around using AI models to help with improving that forecast accuracy, because the typical just looking at your historical sales and trying to generate a forecast is becoming really, really difficult.
Yeah. So you mentioned, you highlighted two phrases, visibility and agility. So where does it lead to? What is the connection?
Well, so if we have a look at those specific points, I mentioned agility and visibility. So if you look at last year, IDC ran a study where they looked specifically at companies analyzing their supply chains and what focus points they were looking at.
Yep.
And in this case, 80% of those companies that they analyzed had projects to improve visibility. And this comes back to that all the disruptions we're seeing. So companies now have to really focus on not only is where's my stuff, but if I'm going to run out, when am I going to run out, and can I commit to orders? But then
Yep.
also the other point is that 90% of them have projects to improve agility. So in this case, they mentioned specifically, and you can see that in the title of the slide, is that IDC mentioned that the combination of visibility and agility is what equals resilience. So in order to have that resilient supply chain to cope with disruptions, you need to have a combination of visibility and agility. Agility in terms of I need to be able to really, really flexibly simulate, run scenarios to see how I can react. So I need to be able to react quickly. I need to have the data in order to react quickly. I can't wait for an entire month to make an adjustment to an S&OP process, for example. But then I also need to have the visibility to quickly see where am I hemorrhaging money, for example. Is it a particular item that I'm running out of stock on all the time? What can I do to resolve that? So that combination of visibility and agility is what leads to the resilience.
Makes sense. Makes sense. We have seen all kind of challenges and all kind of level, even within different kind of business function within the supply chain. So maybe you can highlight a few different kind of challenges among different kind of supply chain leaders.
Yes. So this is really to address the fact that not only are we having all of these disruptions and issues within the supply chain, but depending on how your company is structured, the person will have different challenges. And this comes down to sort of siloed processes we still see typically within supply chains. Not so much with, say, chief supply chain officer, because in that case, if you can have responsibility of the end-to-end supply chain, then things can help. But for example, chief supply chain officers is wanting to generate revenue, maximize margin. But if you look for, say, planning or manufacturing, they're wanting to sort of maximize utilization. So that focusing on that can have a detriment, say, to maximizing revenue, for example, because I'm wanting to have long production runs, for example, not necessarily being flexible. Whereas if you to take someone, say, in customer service, they want that flexibility. They want people to be able to change production lines as quick as possible. And then if you have to look, for example, with logistics fulfillment, they're focusing really on minimizing expense, ensuring that we can get the right provider, the right mode. So depending on who you speak to in the supply chains, they all are focusing on their own focus areas. But ideally, we want them to have one system that can support all of these across the entire supply chain, and that's the end-to-end vision that we're looking at.
Yes. So we just finalized with Supply Chain Media our yearly ranking of the top 28 supply chain executive Europes, and basically it's similar to the Gartner top 25, but then on a personal level. And as you have seen in our research, not all the supply chain officers have responsibility of planning, manufacturing, procurement, and logistics, and sometimes sustainability. The higher ranked ones have these overall responsibility, but I totally understand that it seems a bit siloed still, so what they want to optimize, and you have to the environment to do that.
Exactly.
And maybe we talk also about the insights and outside data. So can you elaborate a bit more about that?
Yeah. So if we look at if we move the focus to what we're seeing the typical roles are focusing on.
Hmm.
Now if I look at what we as Oracle, in terms of what our customers are asking for, and this again ties back to the challenges we've been mentioning in terms of technology and disruptions. But their key thing is they're wanting to know where's their stuff. They're wanting to know, is there a delay? How long is the delay going to be? What is the impact of that delay? And then to have the ability to be able to run simulations and scenarios, and have direction on how to take action. Because a lot of customers that we're talking to say that they've got a problem, but they don't know where to start. And
Yeah.
that's the key thing, is that there are so many fires that they need to put out, that they don't actually know where to start. They need to have direction, and they need to have a structured process that can help guide them.
Yeah. And we have seen in the last few years that the lead times have been extended, and estimated time of arrival were very foggy, I would say. So
Yes.
that needs to change. But if you look to the companies and their systems portfolio, etc., what is missing within these companies?
Well, as I mentioned, because you've got these multiple positions within the supply chain, you have these multiple business silos. So we have situations where logistics is not aligned to planning, and procurement is not aligned to planning, for example. Or you have a situation where there's data sitting in your suppliers, your customers, your carriers, and even in your own facilities. A lot of people will say, I'm using multiple ERP systems, and each of my facilities is running on a different one, but I don't know I don't know what stock I have. So that's one thing, is the ability to gather data across multiple nodes within the supply chain. Um, the ability to have exception-driven planning, so alert you to what is the issue and how to resolve it. So it doesn't help if you get thousands and thousands of messages, about, you need to bring this forward, you need to push that out, and you
Yep.
don't know what to prioritize. And then I mentioned previously, this end-to-end visualization of your supply chain. So where is everything? Am I going to be running out of stock? When will I run out of stock? That type of thing. Obviously, you don't want to run out of stock, but if you're facing that situation, you want to be able to say prioritize your orders, for example. But essentially, it comes down to this messaging, which I'm going to be referring to again and again. Is this detect, decide, and execute?
Yeah. So maybe you can highlight these three steps.
Elaborate what that is.
Yeah. Yeah.
So you'll hear it a couple of times, but essentially, detecting is again around having that exception-driven planning, so that we can highlight if there are delays. What if you are running out of stock of a particular component, which finished goods is going to be impacting.
Hmm.
Understanding, if you delay a particular order, what is the impact? So having this ability to have exception-driven planning that alerts you to an issue. Once you've detected the issue, having this decide capability, which is essentially the simulation scenario planning, where you can, alternative supply, alternative components, alternative end items, reallocating supply, prioritizing demand, prioritizing supply, understanding the cost impact of all of those scenarios that you're running.
Hmm.
And then once you've decided on it, being able to execute that using the system. So you're changing the production, executing it, changing the shipping method, executing it, replanning transportation plans, for example. So that, and being able to communicate, if I've made a change, understand, giving the customer the visibility to that change, so that they are aware of it.
So if I have it correctly, so the side part is the sales and operations planning, and execute is the sales and operation execution. Can I put it somewhere like that?
Not necessarily. So
Okay.
it can function within that, but within, the detect, decide, execute can be within various scenarios. It could be
Okay.
within a sales and operation planning process. It could be within your demand management process. It could be within your supply planning. So it could be execution, but it could also be a scenario. So the scenario differs depending on the process you're following, but that same ability to detect, decide, execute can be short term, medium term, long term.
Okay. Yeah.
It really depends on the scenario, but having that ability across timelines is the thing that's important.
Okay, makes sense. Okay, so in the past we have discussed the phrase control tower, and we have written
Yes.
about it several times. So now you coined the new phrase command center.
Command
Can you
center.
explain the differences?
Well, we can't take responsibility for the name. I mean, there's a Gartner article that has been written to describe the differences between what a control tower and what a command center is.
Uh-huh.
But essentially, the control tower command center is really around the automation, visibility, breaking down those silos and having the predefined use cases. So if we talk about the automation side, control towers tend to be sometimes automated, but when you're working across the silos, it's difficult to automate the process. Whereas command center is mainly mostly automated. I mentioned the silo. So you had visibility, but it'll be like a procurement control tower, a planning control tower, a logistics control tower, an inventory control tower. These are all silos, so they give you visibility, but they don't give you end-to-end visibility. Whereas this ability to have the connected end-to-end and the insights is where the power of the command center is. And then this cross-functional process. So again, when you're in a siloed process, it's additional setup to connect everything. Whereas when you have end-to-end, you can have this cross-functional process. And then I mentioned in the previous slide when you asked, is it SNOP or SNOE? What we have is predefined use cases that are specifically designed to address a particular area, and it can be across the different timelines of long-term tactical or short-term planning. But these predefined use cases are a guide on how to resolve a particular issue when it comes up.
Yeah, and especially with the final red cross at the bottom of control tower.
Yes.
What we have seen in the past few years with all kind of disruption. I can imagine these control towers weren't prepared for all this.
No, it's going to fall over because again you have a siloed issue. So if a disruption occurs and I'm in say logistics or procurement, I would be able to address it in that silo. But now if you want to connect to all across the entire supply chain, it becomes difficult.
Yeah. All right. Oracle, a lot of people know that Oracle is also a provider of databases, but also on applications, business applications, ERP, supply chain applications. So maybe you can elaborate a bit more about how you see how Oracle plays a role of creating a command center.
Yes. So one thing that, as you mentioned, everyone knows Oracle as a database company. One thing that we're really good at is analyzing data, bringing data together. So we are really good at taking data and bringing it into our systems.
Mm-hmm.
But if we talk about typical Oracle data, that's easy. But what we do with the command center is to extend it out to use external data sources. So, for example, things like Everstream Analytics or AccuWeather. This is where we can actually take things like, let's take Everstream Analytics. Everstream will provide you visibility in terms of things like port congestion or extreme weather events. Same thing with AccuWeather, will provide extreme weather events. Now, from a port congestion perspective, I can bring that information in and use that to guide my transportation network. So is there a particular port congestion coming up or at the moment, and I need to use alternatives to move around that? Are there extreme weather patterns that are impacting a manufacturing facility that could result in downtime, and I need to now move production, or at least plan for the possibility of moving production so that I'm prepared if that event happens. But bringing that information into the system, that's where we have power as well.
Yeah, and I also see, the logos of TikTok, Facebook, and Instagram, and Twitter, now known as X, in it. But for forecasting, purposes, it's very useful nowadays to have this social media alerts
Exactly.
and data to have a better understanding what's happening in the outside world for your sales forecast.
Exactly, exactly. So the more information you can bring in that can guide you on your planning process, the better.
Yeah. Still, companies have to get used how to get leading indicators into their forecasting environment, and also on supply side what to do with upstream data from AccuWeather, etc., and also
Yeah.
other supply chain risk, supply risk. Yeah, and getting to the point, your first point about visibility, how will this improve supply chain visibility?
Well, as I mentioned, if you you can see on the you can maybe just bump to the next slide, and I can just we can see the bigger version of it. Being able to bring all the data together is where we have the power. So not only understanding your sustainability measures, understanding your gross margin, understanding weather pattern events, understanding potential supply issues on your customers, any information that you can use to better guide your forecasting process, or to get better guide your transportation process, that information can be brought in and then utilized. Because if you're not actually bringing it in, then you can't use it. In the past, we've done work with automotive companies that are using analysts to guide on where the sales of these automotive companies are now. If you're not actually bringing that data into your systems, you can't actually use it. And
No.
that's the thing, is you need to be able to bring data in, but in a usable form.
Yeah.
So that's the key thing, is bringing data in from external sources in a usable form that can actually guide your planning process.
And if you look at the top line with this colors, you see from gross margin from left to right to demand forecasting accuracy, perfect order fulfillment, and demand at risk, and even CO2. So this kind
Yeah.
of data, these are the data supply chain leaders need to know, also apart from the execution part.
Exactly. And in this particular scenario, this is what I'm going to do is very, very quickly take you through the demand risk use case, and I can go explain in a bit more detail about the various use cases. But in this case, it's the demand at risk use case. And what we're seeing here is that we started a plan. We started our sales and operation planning process at the beginning of the month. Now, midway through the month, we're seeing that the demand, the target that we had for demand at risk was 600K. Now it's 791K. So it's highlighting that there's an issue, and the map is indicating where globally the orders are. So that the higher, or the darker the color, the higher the risk. So you can visualize it very, very quickly and drill down to any of those. So this allows us to very, very quickly analyze it. Now, if I had to open up that, I have a comparison of what my original plan was, which was saying that my risk was 566. It's now jumped to 792, 791. So I would need to analyze what is causing this. And when I mentioned the exception planning, the table on the bottom, the event-based plan, gives me visibility very, very quickly into where the demand at risk is.
Hmm.
So I can very, very quickly drill down to see exactly what is causing that demand at risk in terms of what exceptions. So if you jump to the next slide, now I can see very, very quickly that 791 is split up in terms of one particular item, but it's giving me the exceptions immediately of what's causing that. So guiding me in terms of resolution on how to resolve that. So from there, I can drill directly into, say, my transportation plan. So if you jump to the next one, here I can then visualize those particular orders that that are being impacted from a transportation. And in this case, it's a weather event that is now causing a delay in a shipment. Now, if for example I was using rail or sea, I could potentially change to air. In this case, it's that the mode is air, so there's not a lot I can do to address my transportation plan. But I could potentially add a bit of cost, but ensure that I get there on time and still not impact my margin so much. But in this case, not much I can do because it's an air shipment. So I know that the order is going to be late. Now, what I can potentially do is reprioritize existing orders. Now,
And
anyone who's got an
yeah,
sorry,
before you get any further, yeah, I'm looking at this map, and I've read about the Panama Canal, and there are some issues over there, and they might worsen in the next year.
yeah,
So you see, companies within the U.S. are rerouting from going through the Panama Canal from Los Angeles to New York,
yeah,
going overland. So you
yes.
will see next year that there will some changes based on these events in the Panama Canal, that you will
Yeah,
see this kind of changes happening, what you see on this page.
yeah, exactly. And this is where we can use things like advanced risk notifications. So, for
Hmm.
example, Everstream can give you those notifications of the port congestion or the Panama Canal congestion
Yeah,
to
and
actually advise you what you should do differently.
and one thing before we get to the backlog system, I think that having this early alert gives you the opportunity to respond before the rest of the world will respond to this, because now
Exactly.
you will see that people, companies within the US will reroute through the Panama Canal overland. And if you are the latest one in line to take this choice, and to make this alternative route,
Yeah.
you will be stuck, but probably because there's no capacity anymore to do that.
Exactly. All the capacity that's available is the expensive capacity
Yeah.
because everyone else is already used up all of the more cost effective stuff. Yes,
Yes.
exactly. Or having the ability to plan ahead so that you can do analysis of your strategic transportation plan, for
Yeah.
example. These are
Yeah.
all things that you can combine, but you need to be able to combine all of that.
Yeah. Yeah. Can imagine so. So you were starting to talk about a backlog. So go ahead.
Yeah. So in this particular scenario, if I know that there's a delay in shipment, and I can't bring it any earlier, the only thing I can do is say prioritize. Now, anyone who's got an order management system, you may have thousands of orders in place, and to manually go in and change that is a real nightmare. So within our supply chain planning solution, we have this backlog management solution that can um, plan and reprioritize
Hmm.
orders. So in this particular scenario, it's planning on a combination using the various rules that we have set up, the demand priority rules. In this case, it's planning using the requested date and revenue, but prioritizing requested date over revenue. But if I want to, and if you jump to the next slide, I can then change that so that it replans based on revenue. So in this case, the high revenue orders, I can very, very quickly reprioritize those. So high, customers that could potentially have penalties in place, or customers that pay more, give a higher revenue. This is what I want to do, and then very quickly from here, once I've reprioritized, I can then publish that information to our order management and a global order promise solution, so that when orders are in, they can be promised. Now, what I can see is once I've made that change, I can see that there was an issue by reprioritizing some of those high revenue orders. I can now bring it closer to what it was initially.
Hmm.
But it's not just, we're not talking about just a BI tool here. We're talking about a connected solution that allows me to pull data from supply chain planning, from other sources, visualize the data within this platform, which is called our Fusion Data Intelligence platform, and then drill down from here into the various applications to very quickly resolve issues like we did with backlog management, and then visualize the data again within our Fusion Data Intelligence platform.
So the right people do know what they have to do to make this happen.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. And any time a particular scenario happens, having those predefined use cases to address the issue.
I was wondering, before we get to the detect, decide, execute steps. I was wondering. There's decision intelligence, etc. is in the near future, could you automate this kind of things, or do you still have to, sense this and get to the suggestions what to do next before you automate this execution step?
There are a number of things that can be automated. So if a particular scenario happens and that particular process is followed, a lot of those steps can be automated. So, for example, within our replenishment planning solution,
Hmm.
it can run and lights out functionality. So if an issue comes up, we can visualize it within Fusion Data Intelligence, but a lot of the sort of heavy lifting within planning can function. A lot of that can function as a lights out, but
Yeah,
also it's not a case of like we had with the backlog management. If the scenario did occur and I needed to now go into my 1,000 orders and manually adjust those, that's very, very heavily in terms of intensive for a user. So it's going to take you a lot of time.
yeah,
Whereas if you can set it up with rules and priorities, I can, click of a button, I can resolve it. So from that perspective, it's automated in that the issue can be highlighted, the way to address the issue and resolve it can be very, very quick and flexible, so that you can very, very quickly, using that
yeah,
concept of agility, come up with an answer very, very quickly. Whereas if I have to wait, if an issue comes up and I need to wait a month because I can't make any changes to my plan because
yeah,
I'm already in an SNOP process and it's taking me, say, 3 weeks to gather all the data together, you're not going to be able to respond quickly. Whereas this issue comes up, I need to address it. I can very, very quickly visualize the information within transportation planning, make adjustments, come to my backlog, and very, very quickly, with a click of a button, adjust and update.
and I can then over time, within a few years, if companies are using this kind of Fusion platform for these purposes, in the end, they know which adjustment they can automate. But for now, they have to
Exactly.
know first what are the most common ones, what are the most impactful ones, etc.
Yeah, and I mean, an example of this, we had a customer speaking at the Gartner Supply Chain Summit,
Hmm.
Chris Cottington from Wolseley, and he mentioned that they're using our replenishment and supply planning solutions. 80% of their purchase requisitions, they're in a wholesale distribution company. 80% of their purchase requisitions are auto-generated to purchase orders without a human touching it, without a human hand touching it. So some, very quickly making adjustments within supply chain planning, so that no one needs to make any adjustments to the purchase requisitions that are recommended by the system.
Talking about supply chain planning, maybe you can elaborate, how supply chain fits in the detect, decide, and execute steps.
Yes. Okay. So essentially, when we talk about supply chain command center, at the bottom you can see all of our use cases, and I'll go into a bit more detail about the use cases in a few minutes. But essentially, the supply chain planning solution forms the backbone of it in terms of its decision scenario simulation capabilities and execution capabilities, but also has the ability to bring together manufacturing, inventory, logistics. So depending on the particular scenario, I can bring other information into the system, but supply chain planning forms the backbone of that.
Hmm. All right. So first, the first step, where to start.
Yes, yes. So this is the one I just took you through, which is essentially we got an extreme weather event,
Yep.
getting an alert about that event, getting an alert about the shipment delay, and as a result, a raw material shortage, and then the ability to very, very quickly look at alternative carriers, alternative suppliers, and then from an execute perspective to actually execute, a shorter lead time or higher prioritization of revenue orders. This is essentially what the demand risk management solution is. Now, if people are interested, and there's a link at the end of the presentation to our supply chain command center website on oracle.com, and there's a recorded webinar with a live demo. I was showing you screenshots, but we have our marketing lead, Daniel Bachar, who along with the solution engineer there's a recorded 1-hour webinar on the demand risk management as well as the multi-tier network visibility. So anyone who's interested can go and have a look at those.
So they're getting to the next step, the manufacturing execution constraint aspect.
Yes. So in this case, this is again using the power of we've heard the concept of Internet of Things, but it doesn't. It's not always something that you can tangibly use. Now, in this case, using these digital twin for my resources, the application is able to then detect anomalies, so predict when a resource is likely to fail. Now, if that particular resource is in your manufacturing plan, the planning advisor within supply planning will actually alert you that this particular resource is in your plan, and there's say 80% or 75% chance of a failure. So giving you the ability to prepare for failure, and if that resource is there, potentially planning for a downtime or a alternative. Mm-hmm. Now, so from the detect side, giving you that alert, an intelligent alert, and then from a decide perspective, giving you the ability to anticipate changes to that line, considering new production lines, or changing the sequence of your plan so that if that resource fails, it's not going to impact you negatively. And then from the execute perspective, selecting those resources and executing the changes within your plan.
So, and how the next case, how would the multi-tier network visibility and response case would look like?
This is again using a combination of our supply planning and our collaboration tools. So in this case, I have the ability to have notifications from my suppliers. So I'm collaborating with my suppliers, so I can then tell them what we're going to be ordering from them, and they can commit to that. But if the supplier tells me, in 3 weeks' time, I'm going to have an issue, or I've got an issue right now, you don't have to wait until the order doesn't arrive. You can have visibility to say that there's going to be an issue. Being able to make changes in terms of either securing an alternative supplier or collaborating with that supplier to potentially increase their availability, potentially at a higher cost. So let's say, for example, the supplier needs to run overtime, but it's going to be a higher cost for them. We can potentially have that discussion where, okay, yes, it'll cost us more, but I'm happy to take that hit if at least we know about it, or share the cost, for example. But that collaboration capability. And then from there, updating the supplier capacity within your application, monitoring the performance, so having that ability to really, really quickly identify an issue, collaborate with the supplier, and then update your plan accordingly so that you're not facing any issues.
Yeah. So recently we did a big study on reshoring among 150 manufacturing companies in the US and Europe. We did it together with the Buck Consultancy, and a lot of companies are considering or actually are doing reshoring, and this kind of multi-tier network visibility and response capability is necessary to put it into place. And
exactly.
Yeah, good point. Next case, new product introduction. A lot of CPG companies especially are introducing a lot of new products every year. So how to deal with that?
Yes, so in this case, it's utilizing capabilities within the application, again, using intelligent solutions to consider the product and location attributes, and then using machine learning to help that if you're now wanting to launch a new product, considering those attributes, having the machine learning review your existing and past products and the relationship between those attributes you have, like shape, size, color, whatever. Mm-hmm. So that when the relationship between those attributes and the demand pattern, so that when you're now coming to launch your new product, you now have the ability to have the system guide you in terms of, based on those new attributes that you're going to include in your new product, give you guidance in terms of what should the launch curve be, what should the launch volume be, and then collaborate with your suppliers on getting, again, using the supply collaboration to actually get those orders to them, and then releasing the plan, launching the new item, and reviewing it in terms of the execute function.
But I still think, that a lot of companies are, launching new products, changing the packaging, whatever, call it a new product or not, but it's still a new SKU, and they have to launch it. And some, new products will catch on, some don't. So I think that the companies should be aware of that. That's, I think, in the S&OP cycle, that's the most forgotten phase. Your portfolio
It is.
overview.
It is. There's also capabilities around super session planning. So a lot of companies will launch a new product, but it's a slight variation on the old one. So having the ability to include the super session chain within your planning is really important. So that if an order comes in, you don't want to necessarily take the order for the new item. You wanted to consider that it must clear the old item, but then also if you want to consider your demand pattern, you need to be able to consider the entire super session chain of that item as well, so that you can actually better predict the forecast.
Yeah, and a lot of companies are still struggling with phasing out, old SKUs. So that should also be in this scenario, because phasing out is also a challenge, and in a timely manner. So, and
Exactly.
that's the reason why a lot of the warehouses all over the world are stuck with all kind of old products and not able to be sold.
Yes, it's an interesting challenge. A lot of companies are battling with that, Brian.
Yeah, no, and getting to inventory management, in the next scenario, that's the case. Maybe you can elaborate on that.
Yes, so here, one of the challenges that a lot of companies have is around. I've got my distribution network, but there's a lot of demand variations, items behaving differently. But in some cases, a lot of items are very, very similar. So being able to segment the data is really important. Being able to create inventory planning policies by segment, and then from a detect perspective, to be able to detect if there's a variation in a particular demand of an item, to highlight, to notify you of that, to notify you that and I know we have this automation of inventory rebalancing, but being alerted that you are overstocked on a particular location, and giving you the alert that you need to now potentially rebalance it is something that is really, really important as well. And then visibility in terms of where your inventory is, and as I mentioned, being able to control your safety stock and the ability to rebalance and automate a lot of these processes is really, really important.
As we have seen in our global study, like I mentioned, we see next to reshoring also downstream more regionalization. So in Europe, for example, we used to have big European distribution centers, but now we see more local hubs popping up,
Exactly.
in Eastern Europe or in Iberia, so we see that also on the distribution side, the patterns are changing, and the new ways of distribution is also changing, getting closer to your end market. That's basically it. And we see also, multi-echelon inventory planning is very
Exactly.
useful in that sense.
Exactly. And the challenge always with proliferation of warehouses is that it becomes much more difficult to predict the demand at a smaller level, and that's where you often end up with out of stock or too much stock. And this is why being able to rebalance that inventory within a certain segment is really important.
Next case, revenue risk management, and I think that a lot of CFOs are interested in it, this case.
Exactly. So this is again, depending on how you're wanting to see it, it can potentially be within an S&OP process, but it could also be within an S&OE side of things. In this case, the example we have is a particular situation where there's a potential margin drop You're now wanting to revise, review, to understand what the impact is on that margin. Being able to have the ability to plan, simulate one scenarios of what you need to do to resolve that. But then also, bring the information together so that you have visibility of what's happening on that financial side into my supply chain, so that you can then execute, prioritize, reschedule orders if you need to make changes to price or promotions. Understand the impact of that. So it's around bringing my financial planning and supply chain planning together, so that the information is available to both. And this could be
Yeah.
SMOE or SNOP.
Yeah, before we get to the final use case, in this matter, there's a lot of discussion about getting for SNOP to the next level, call it integrated business planning, where
Yes.
first in SNOP is like the demand and supply balancing in volumes, and in IBP you talk about euros or dollars.
Yes.
But do you need to level up your process, or is this also applicable when you might not have a strictly IBP process going on? Uh,
Well,
like some are saying.
it really depends on the maturity of the financial planning and supply chain planning side of
Mm,
things. So we've seen companies that have a really tight knit scenario where financial planning still happens,
mhm.
but being able to utilize that financial planning or budgeting system within supply chain is then really important, because again, as I mentioned, unless you have the information in a usable form, it's completely useless. So we've seen a lot of companies where they are wanting to do their SNOP process to come up with a consensus forecast, but they're planning for some of the items at item level or item customer level, but financial planning is at product category level. So yes, it's there, but it's not in a usable form. So yes, we know that people are wanting to achieve a certain financial objective, but it's not always easy to come down from that aggregate level to disaggregate item level planning. And this is where we have a lot of power in our solution to allow for that. So really, it depends on how integrated you're wanting to get to. It's really important to have both ends of the company focusing on the right direction, because if, as I said, the financial planning team are going off in one direction, and supply chain planning team are going off in another direction, now you're going to have no alignment. So things that you agree at an aggregate level are not going to be executed. So
So
it's really important.
yeah, and what I know, I've seen it several times talking to companies and also from my university days. Getting a better grasp on cost to serve on a product group level or even an SKU level.
Yes.
What is your profit margin for an SKU? That's something that's an area where the financial planners and the supply chain planners should be aligned, and should be on the same page, and the financial department should provide numbers to get to this cost to serve kind of number on a product group level or an SKU level.
Yeah, and it's often the to get the teams to talk to each other is a challenge on its own. But
Hmm.
the financial, I mean, for them, the finance team are ideally wanting to see the costing information at an
Yeah.
item level, and that information supply chain has. They've done the detailed analysis of what they're going to be, what are the costs at an item level, and this is information that the financial planning team need. But also, as I mentioned, being able to plan at a category level where supply chain are sometimes wanting to plan at an item level is also something that where there's a disconnect. And being able to enter in, a financial plan at a product category level and disaggregate that to an item customer level is where you have a lot of power to actually then visualize what is my financial plan at an item customer level. Okay, now that I've seen it, I can see what finance wants to do. And we can see what we need to do from a supply chain in order to execute that.
Yeah. And I think the biggest challenge, all in all, with this kind of discussion is the cost allocation to product
Exactly.
groups or SKUs. Yeah, okay,
Yes.
we don't solve this in this hour, Anyway,
No.
and a final case is the lead time variability. So, do explain.
Yes. You mentioned, I think in one of the earlier slides is lead time. So lead time is critical to supply chain planning.
Yeah.
If the lead times are wrong, your supply chain is going to be wrong. It's the concept of garbage in, garbage out. If I have an expectation that all my components are going to be arriving within a certain lead time, and they come late or they come early, that's not helping me. we need to have the ability to predict. So what we have is in this case is a solution where the system is analyzing the planned lead time versus the actual lead time. So based on what was ordered,
Hmm.
when it was the order date versus the actual date, analyzing that and comparing it to the planned lead time, and then advising you if that particular item is in your plan, advising you that there's now a high variability of lead time in your plan, and now giving you the ability to detect purchase items that there is a variance, being able to review, analyze the variability in terms of a heat map, and then also run scenarios to see what that impact on the lead time is, and then giving you the ability to update the lead time accordingly, so that you can actually have a plan with the correct data. Now, if you're dealing with thousands of finished good items, you could have tens of thousands of components from hundreds or thousands of suppliers. Doing this manually is a really tough task. So having the ability to have a system that can automate, guide you, resolve it, so that your planning data, your master data, is as accurate.
Yeah, what I've seen, in my university, I did MRP calculations on paper, so
Yeah,
I know, and with a lot of ERP systems, the MRP data about lead times is still on default,
yeah,
since they have implemented, say, 10, 15 years ago, never updated.
exactly,
And some people say, put off the MRP engine, we do it anyway, another way. So, but this is essential, especially when we have seen this lead time variation in the last couple of years because of COVID and all the other disruptions is essential. So that's very powerful stuff.
exactly.
We're almost on the hour, but I have a slide, based on our management article we just published in our latest issue of Supply Chain Movement. And I think this visual highlights the whole thing you just discussed and described. In the old days, we had logistics control tower focusing on OTIF. You have manufacturing control towers focusing on OEE, and you have procurement control towers, with the whole purchase to pay cycle. But now we see there is an overall supply chain, call it control tower or command center, but it's basically this is what we need, but because we have to connect it all, especially when you see this turbulence flying over, and that won't go away for the next year or decade, I think. So this is the
Exactly.
overall visualization, I think.
Yeah, exactly. And this is where we need to break down those silos, because if those silos remain, it becomes really difficult. There's manual processes to extract the data, to move it across, to actually act upon it. Because if you're wanting to have a situation where if something happens, I need to be alerted. There's an exception process that needs to alert me that something has gone wrong. I need to have a process where I can visualize it across the end-to-end supply chain. I need to be able to know what to do to resolve it, and then I need to execute that. And that comes down to the concept: detect, decide, execute.
Yeah, right. So thanks. So we're getting to the Q&A. We have 2 minutes to go. So and I see you have some questions. I already asked to you. Um, my question we get before we get to the wrap up. So where this Fusion platform has been launched, I think 1 year ago. So where do you see the most appetite for what kind of scenarios are companies already using this kind of command center platform?
So yeah, we're seeing a lot of interest around the processes that I mentioned, like for example, demand at risk, being able to bring together planning and logistics. So there's a lot of interest that we're seeing, that a lot of people are, as we mentioned in that IDC case, wanting that visibility. So just being able to have the visibility of your end-to-end supply chain is already something that we're seeing a lot of interest in at the
Yeah.
moment.
Yeah, and knowing that Oracle has an ERP background, but then again, it's not necessarily needed to have an Oracle ERP backbone for this purpose, is it?
So no, the integration we're talking about is between the supply chain planning modules
Okay.
and the sort of the Fusion data intelligence. So essentially, the benefit that we have is that we have these what they call lights out data pipelines that function between things like inventory, manufacturing, procurement, as well as supply chain planning, so that you don't have to run a process to extract the data, upload it into the Fusion data intelligence. It's basically flowing. So changes I'm making on my planning system are being updated. So from that perspective, the benefit is in terms of the ability to extract the data, and then when you're in the Fusion data intelligence platform, to be able to drill back down again. So now, yes, you can bring in data from other systems, but then it becomes more just of a sort of BI visualization.
Mm-hmm.
So yes, you can pull data in from other systems, but you don't necessarily have to, for example, have Oracle ERP for that. Customers who are using SAP or JD Edwards or EBS,
Mm-hmm.
as long as they're doing the planning, as long as we're doing the planning within supply chain planning, there we
Yeah.
can still take advantage. So yes, some of the information is going to be a bit more difficult to get in, but it is possible to get data in. But yeah, the power of this end to end, when you talk about the end to end process, is the ability to very quickly have access to my inventory, my procurement data, my manufacturing data, my planning data, so that I don't have to go and look for it. It's just there.
Yeah. All
That
right.
is the power. You don't have to gather data. There's many S&OP customers that we talk to where they say, well, we're running a monthly process for our sales and operation planning, and one of the reasons we're running a monthly process is it takes 3 weeks to get the data so that I can actually I can actually gather all the data, so that when I have my plan, my S&OP process in the 4th week, I've now managed to gather all the data. Here we're talking about instantaneous data. Changes I've made is visible immediately.
Okay. Thanks. So we're on the hour. 2 minutes over the hour. So I would
Okay.
suggest that anyone who has some more questions to Glenn, please join us next in the next 28 minutes in our virtual lounge, and we will be sitting at table 1. So just click on a chair at table 1, and a kind of Zoom meeting will pop up. So that's my suggestion. For further information, now on the left-hand side, this is the IT subway map. We have a dedicated website. You can download the subway map, and in the middle, we created a visualization of an ecosystem for household products. We created it together with the Oracle. That's very useful to visualize how your supply chain are transforming from a linear to a circular ecosystem. And on the right hand side, like Glenn has mentioned, there's a website where you have a lot of data on the command center, also pre-recorded webinars. With that, I would like to thank the audience for listening in, and I hope you liked it, either live or recorded. And Glenn, thank you for your elaboration. Thanks for now.
Yeah, thank you very much. You just need to tell me how we can join the.
I will. For next, I will say bye to the audience, and I hope to see you another time at our webinar Wednesday, and maybe I will see you later in a few seconds in the lounge. And for now, I would say bye bye and see you next time.
Thank you all.